welcoming you back to the desk of Caddicarus. Join us as we partake into a new installment of Current Quickies.
Hello my duckies, and today, just in time for Halloween, let's talk about another spooky game, Salt and Sanctuary on PS4. Cue. I heard a lot about this game after I really got into Dark Souls, and I really wanted to wait for it to come out on Vita before playing it, but the devs are still working their hardest to get that version perfect, so until then, I couldn't wait any longer, and I tried out the PS4 version, and what did I think of it? Well...
Good fucking god, if you'd come up to me a year ago and said that an indie dev were going to take the best elements of Dark Souls and Metroidvania, splice them together and make it an amazing and dark cartoony 2D action RPG, I would have been so skeptical I would have honestly ignored you. I wouldn't have figured it was possible, let alone execute it with such grace and depth with a team of just 2 people. But right here, Salt and Sanctuary proved me completely wrong, and holy shit, I can't believe this game is as good as it is, along with it looking like $1 million. The best thing about this game as far as I'm concerned is exactly what I mentioned a second ago, the splicing of 2 distinct styles of game, and not only doing it for the sake of a gimmick or deliberate referencing, but actually make them both mechanically work individually and together on their own terms. The Metroidvania elements of this game are beautifully done, giving you a completely huge world to explore with tons of different areas to platform your way around and even more secrets to uncover hidden in special walls. The level design is very diverse and hugely open with no set linear path, tons of branching side areas, and exploration is usually rewarded by giving you important items, special weapons that reward your curiosity, more cash for merchants, and more salt for your upgrading. Over the course of the game, you connect with the world and its demented environments that could actually scare me on occasion purely from you just playing through it, and it teaches you all of its rules and hazards from pure interaction without ever coming across as trial and error, even with traps. And it even feels Metroidvania from how you find permanent powers like wall jumping and air dashing in order to further explore the huge world and even backtrack to other areas you couldn't reach or access before. And what's great is that backtracking is never a chore, from the cool warping system and even multiple areas looping back around each other with plenty of shortcuts to further connect the world together and make you feel a bigger part of it as you remember how it all fits together. Not to mention some areas you revisit with the powers just give you the pre-mentioned weapons and items that are ultra special since they are optional, and other locked out places with powers open up to not only entirely optional areas but also major parts of the game. So basically exploration is rewarding on a level that I can't feasibly describe. This is all backed up by the classic RPG elements and thousands of variables, not just for upgrading your gear but also choosing your gear in the first place, picking the correct armor and special buffs for attack and defense, and how to approach enemies and bosses, and even choices to play as any character you want to, from a brawler to a magician. All of these elements splice perfectly into the more Dark Souls elements of the game that it's clearly inspired by, firstly by its control style, and not only how it manages to be extremely free-flowing and bouncy for a platform, but also heavy and strategic for a Souls game with lots of similar features like the stamina meter, and even in the way you hold weapons and shields, use torches, light and heavy attacks, magic, cycling through usable items and such is mostly taken from Souls, straight from the way the controls are placed on the controller in those games. And how they work in tangent with the platforming is not only impressive but so natural. Much like Souls, you need to search for safe places to refill health regens, manage your covenant that you can grow and spread around the world, and get checkpoints. But not only are these just fine as they are, you have to find special statues that summon particular handymen, from merchants and blacksmiths to travelers and sellswords for each safe haven to bring you particular benefits. So unlike Souls, you need to strategically decide when and where to use these limited statues that you find around the world and where you think they'll be most useful to you, making the safe havens that much more of a mechanic than just being a safe place like how Souls goes about it. Leveling up is also very Souls as you use special currency to do it, but here you have a huge ass skill tree with so many variables and unlockable tiers of items and benefits for your character to use depending on what branches of the tree you head for. For instance, going in the dexterity branches increases not only your damage with those kinds of weapons best suited in its scaling rating, but also lets you use more powerful and bigger variations of dexterity weapons. And the same can even apply with classes of armor to strength, endurance, magic, etc., which all have other benefits like more overall damage, more carry weight, and more stamina. This game is just so fucking customizable it hurts to think about it. Along with the control style, combat is also extremely Souls-like with the attack styles, but again it's spliced with the Metroidvania stuff so that you have to watch your stamina, but you can leap all over the place and perform devastating combos. You can also roll to avoid attacks, shield, guard, two-handed weapon for greater damage at the cost of your shield, and even the parrying and stab attack system from Souls is used here, yet in my opinion is way more fair to do and tons more rewarding because of that. It's all extremely Souls, absolutely, and enemies make you use every strategy you can for both 2D platforming and Souls-like combat to make it an extremely deep and engaging game overall, and when the game wants to go dark, fuck, Dark Souls hasn't got anything on this shit. And of course you have the boss battles, and my god, for 2D they're awesome. There are tons of them to go through, including optional ones. The designs of them are twisted and grotesque, and the way you have to approach them and even how they attack you are surprisingly varied for only working on a flat 2D plane, and they are all completely memorable in their own ways from visual design and attack styles alone. The important question is, do they feel good to kill? Oh, absolutely. And even if a few of them go around the same method of play, what with it being 2D and especially in melee fights, you still feel as though you've outwitted them from your rolling, shielding, and jumping reflexes whenever they apply, and for totally different reasons if they range attack you or are the size of a 6-story house. This is all topped off by hours upon hours worth of pure gameplay, one of the greatest, goriest, thickest, and most unsettling atmospheres for a 2D game I think I've ever seen next to Lone Survivor, so many optional things to do, a great level of difficulty even though not quite as difficult as Souls and therefore way more accessible, and huge amounts of replayability, and for a team of only 2 fucking people, what? However, what I'm about to say is going to make me sound like a complete arsehole, so please don't take what I'm saying here that coldly, but when talking about the things I wasn't fond of in this game, the music and the story, this does not mean that they are bad at all, but let me explain my distaste. The exploring musical themes that occasionally fade into the platforming are foreboding and badass, and the boss themes are grand, stressful, and epic, but the problem with them is that they're just not that memorable since they all use the same instrumentation with this distorted guitar making every piece feel like they blend together, and that's not helped by the same guitar never dynamically getting used that differently, and many of the same repetitive themes are droned over and over again with lots of the pieces. Personally, I would have preferred nothing but silence in the exploring like the game does 50% of the time to give you the perfect atmosphere, get rid of the other tracks that aren't really that memorable and don't add to anything other than actually make me feel more comfortable, which I wasn't expecting, and then add more character variation and drive to the boss encounters with totally different things to make each of them stand out even more than they do, and also make me interested with the lore and the backstory of the bosses, because with many many of them using the exact same themes, they start to not feel as special as each other in a story context. The story itself, much like the music, I actually really liked, and it's well constructed, not to mention full of disturbing connotations, even more frightening ideas than what other games like Dark Souls have stepped into. But along with the music not playing as big of a role I think it should have with characterizing the bosses, I never found myself 100% interested with the lore overall. It's there, and like I said, tons of thought and effort went into it and how the world weaves together, and it's amazing for most games in general, let alone 2D games, but I don't know, something was missing a bit here. And despite reading up every item description, there just wasn't anything here I found too alluring or made me desperate to go out and search what it all meant. It might be since there's only so much you can see with the camera angles and explore yourself with a flat 2D against Dark Souls multi-layered 3D level design features, and the lack of voice acting doesn't add that extra injection of intrigue the characters needed. Maybe it needed a little bit more visual contrast or boss battle introduction cutscenes to make them all tell stories of the area you just searched in with their body language, how they react to your presence and such. I don't know. I know it sounds like being very fucking picky here, maybe I am, but I actually find it difficult to put my finger on why I wasn't massively interested in the story here despite how solid it is, so it could be one or all of those things I just talked about, but honestly I don't know and I'm gonna shut up. Overall though, my complaints on that front don't massively demean what is otherwise a fantastic game, one of the best indie games I think I've ever played by far. And for something that I didn't think possible and initially doubted, I couldn't be proven any more wrong, and it makes me so happy.
And so, I'm gonna give the PS4 version of Salt and Sanctuary a 9 out of fucking 10. I may not have loved the music, I think the boss weapons could have been a lot better for a greater reward, and some of the story elements didn't really interest me that much, but I can't fault it on much else because everything else it does is so fucking brilliant. So, if you like Dark Souls and you like Metroidvania, or you don't like any of them, just do yourself a favour and get this game now. Q.
Ay, 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 ay.